Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, colleagues, it's a pleasure to join you here in Abu Dhabi for this vital discussion, the climate crossroads, double down or adapt. Just 2 months ago, I sat here in Abu Dhabi at this very conference center at another major energy conference to hear the US Secretary of Interior declare that the energy transition is over. I am here to tell you today that the energy transition is far from over. It continues to move at pace, albeit with bumps in the road. As a professional body, my organization, the Energy Institute, deals in facts. There's been a lot of debate whether this is an energy transition or an energy addition. Our statistical review of world energy, which we publish each year, gives us some answers. In 2024, overall energy demand rose by 2%, and all major forms of energy reached record highs. Coal, oil, gas, renewables, nuclear, hydro, all hit record levels. At a global level, this up until now has indeed been an energy addition. But, and it's a very big but, renewables are growing at 9 times the rate of fossil fuels today. And the global picture masks what is happening at a regional level. Europe peaked in fossil 2 decades ago, and the US just a year after. And here in the UAE, we've seen what strong leadership can deliver, with roughly 150% increase in clean energy capacity since 2022. Reaching over 50 gigawatts today and well on track for 100 gigawatts by 2030. And in China, we are seeing some critical inflection points. Oil is at or close to plateauing. Gasoline and diesel are in decline. And for the first time, coal may be declining in power generation. Distinguished guests, Your Excellencies, the energy transition is happening. But it is a disorderly energy transition. Electricity is growing at twice the rate of overall energy demand, signaling an age of electricity is no longer a dream, but a reality, and it is actively reshaping the global energy system. Yet this electrification is unfolding against a backdrop of record emissions and intensifying climate impacts, which is why today's question is not an all question around mitigation or adaptation. The world unambiguously needs both. Taking the words of His Excellency Dr. Sultan, we need to be pragmatic about how we treat this transition. And I believe that and share that view. We cannot be ideological. Whilst electrification is the key to driving efficiency in consumption and growing roughly double the rate of overall energy demand, we need to recognize that without electricity today, only meets 20% of energy demand. And whilst our friends here at Masdar have demonstrated that firm solar and battery storage can work in tandem and do that economically, without a lot of gas in my own country in the last few weeks, the lights would have gone out. So we need both for now. Whilst there is some truth in the energy addition, at least up until now, that does not mean that the energy transition is not happening. So as I hand over for this next session, and to people who know far more about this topic, let us choose pragmatism over ideology. Let us choose collaboration over division. And let us choose optimism over opportunism. An optimism that comes from honest numbers, from projects like we see here in the United Arab Emirates, and from the leadership that you are demonstrating here and across the world in this energy transition. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much.
Many thanks to Nick Wayth for setting the stage for our debate now. And this question, which I mentioned in my introduction to him, Do we double down on mitigation, or do we adapt faster? Our next debate will be moderated by Nick, who will be coming back with 2 global change makers. Thank you very much. Please wish them a very good and healthy conversation here. Thank you.
So in a slight change to the schedule, I'm back on stage to moderate this session, and delighted to have 2 real global experts. We're really lucky to have 2 of the world's leading experts in both mitigation and adaptation on stage. Her Excellency Patricia Espinosa, who many of you know through her many activities, and now founding partner and CEO of 1.5, and Professor Patrick, I won't say this right, but Verkooijen, who is the President and CEO of the Global Centre on Adaptation. I think we've got a short amount of time to discuss this sort of topic of doubling down on mitigation or focusing on adaptation. So maybe just invite each of you to say a few quick remarks, and then we can turn this into a discussion on how we adapt this. Patricia, maybe start with you. Do we double down on mitigation, or do we focus on adaptation?
Thank you, Nick. And by the way, also, I will try to build up a little bit on your remarks right now. I think it's important that we address the issue of what do we understand exactly by adaptation? How do we frame adaptation? How do we frame mitigation? Now, having said that, I think it has been one of the big successes of Paris was the fact that all countries agreed to assume a responsibility for mitigating their emissions. And this is why every country that is part to the Paris Agreement has accepted and has some commitments regarding mitigation. Those commitments need to be met. And those commitments, if they are met, are going to make adaptation easier for the future. However, altogether, it's a comprehensive agenda.
So Patrick, tell us more. I mean, you're leading adaptation. Climate change is happening today. It's real. It's affecting crops. It's affecting the global energy system. What's the case for accelerating adaptation?
Well, thank you, Nick, and it's a great honor to be on stage again with you, Patricia. I mean, I think everybody outside this room would find it very difficult even to comprehend what adaptation means. But if you're a smallholder farmer living in Kenya, where I live, outside Nairobi in Makwene, and you were hit by a drought 2 years ago, and this year you were hit by a flood, and as a consequence, you have to pull your kids out of school because you can't afford it anymore, you know what adaptation means. It basically hits your economic bottom very, very quickly. If you're a finance minister, say in Kenya, and when you know that climate impacts either way 3% of GDP of your GDP every single year, and on top of that you have to pay 3% on interest payment on the debt which you sustain as a country, you know that this adaptation is a real sort of economic imperative. I mean, Patricia, when you were leading the UNFCCC, I think it was very clear. The mantra was, adaptation is the poor cousin of the climate debate. The reality today is, quite frankly, it's on life support, right? I mean, and I think, Nick, as you also mentioned, this is a missed opportunity. I think all of us here in this audience would agree that, let's say, Africa, the most vulnerable continent, 9 out of the 10 most climate vulnerable nations are in Africa. Of course, it's a moral imperative for the global north to invest, but there is an economic imperative to invest, because every dollar, euro, pound invested in adaptation has a much higher return.
Thank you, Patrick. And if I can come back to you, Patricia, I mean, we've talked about, there's a moral, ethical case, but there's also an economic case. Yeah. Can you talk about the economic case, Patricia, and we'll come back to you, Patrick, for both, actually, for both mitigation and adaptation?
Well, I think that in the current world, we there's lots of evidence, and Patrick, thank you for bringing up those examples, which I think illustrate very well the situation. There's enough evidence that not addressing the effects of climate change means a loss of lives and a loss of resources, a loss of opportunities. It's a loss for everyone. Now, what I believe has happened is that we continue to assess climate risks against the current situation. Mm-hmm. And we are not yet really going into assessing climate risk towards the projections that so many scientists are already doing around the world. We know that those very extreme weather events are going to be more stronger and more frequent. So that means that whoever is taking a decision, be it in the family, be it in government, be it in private sector, should be making these decisions against a scenario that is very clearly put in front of us. On the other hand, and Patrick was talking about a business opportunity, right? There is a new economy, the green economy that some people call like that. We could call it in different ways. But this new economy is creating opportunities for investments. This is creating opportunities also for all kinds of businesses, big and small, in order to adapt, to build resilience in their operations. So I think this is really, as some people say, a no-brainer. We really need to take this seriously and take those opportunities.
Yeah, maybe I can build on that, Nick, if you allow me. So building on sort of Patricia's narrative, it's not a sunk cost, it's an investment. So how do you get investors to the table to indeed invest, not just in mitigation, but also in adaptation? Just throw out a couple of numbers, Nick, if you allow me. Just take Africa as a continent. How much does Africa need on an annual basis to invest in climate resilience, in adaptation? On an annual basis, roughly is in the order of $100 billion. How much is currently flowing to climate adaptation in Africa is $10 billion, i.e. there's a delta of $90 billion. We know that this $90 billion will not come from development finance. I think we're all in agreement and in understanding that development finance basically is tanking. Within that, climate finance is tanking. So that delta of $90 billion for Africa alone needs to come from somewhere else if you want to build your economy in a resilient way. It has to come from the business sector. So if you are a company in drought-tolerant seeds, this is the future market which you want to enter. If you are a company who invests in climate adaptation or adaptation analytics, this is a future frontier area. So I think that the general approach should be about investments. And I think, Nick, and I'm sure you mentioned it as well on previous panels where you were in, the GIC, the Singapore Sovereign Wealth Fund, they did a sort of an analysis. What is the business, what is the market size of investing in climate resilience, i.e. in adaptation? Today, it is $1 trillion. But what is the opportunity when basically with the climate crisis escalating, it's in the order of $4 trillion. So for the investors in this room and for those online, I would just encourage you not to see this as a sunk cost, but if you don't invest, you basically miss out on the frontier area of the 21st century.
And Patricia, if I can come back to you, because this has been deliberately set up as a debate, sort of two opposing forces, but clearly there's a sort of interlinkage and an argument for both. I mean, can you talk about, Patricia, the sort of the interlink between mitigation and adaptation?
The framing of both things. Well, yes. Let me say, since the beginning and since the convention was approved and later on the Paris Agreement, it was very clear. A lot of emphasis was made on the issue of mitigation. Why? Probably because it was the easier way of explaining that something had to be done and something that could be counted and could be really analyzed more easily. The concept of adaptation was there from the very beginning, but it was not until very recently, actually after the Paris Agreement was approved, when there was more emphasis and more insistence by developing countries on the need to support adaptation. The climate regime, the global climate regime, is based in these two pillars, and a third pillar, which is finance, capacity building, and cooperation. So the problem that we have seen is that while resources have been invested in addressing mitigation, especially in the area of energy, there has not been the same attention and the same kind of resources going to adaptation. And that is really something that needs to be taken seriously, because as Patrick was saying, how much of an opportunity that is. But also because at the end, this agenda of climate change is really a development agenda. It stands at the center of development, of the well-being of people. So in bigger terms, of course, if we take the situation in some island countries in the Pacific, of course, their impact into the emissions globally is really almost nothing. It doesn't move the needle, so to say. But at the same time, every time that they have an extreme weather event, they are, on the one side, losing a lot of people losing a very, very small part of their very small populations. They get indebted. This is very clearly the case, for example, in the Caribbean. The Caribbean countries, that every time that they have a loss of, 30% of GDP, then they get new debts, and they get into a situation where they cannot really go out of this debt trap or debt issue. So it is really important to understand that we have those three pillars, and the third pillar, which is finance, needs to be really supporting the other two pillars. And that, as Patrick was saying, this finance is not a cost. It's an investment. It's an investment in resilience, it's a business investment in order to participate in a new economy that is building up.
I think that's a great way to finish. I'd love to come back to you, Patrick, for a closing comment, but we are
running out of time.
So I do apologize for that. But Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, please thank our incredibly esteemed speakers today. Thank you.
Thank you.